significant is it that, for instance, banks decarbonize?
Well, it's very important. See, we cannot get the global economy to move in the right direction if the financial market doesn't move in the right direction. We have the task force for financial disclosure, where it is very important for the financial industry to see what the risk is of carbon in someone's value chain. We have to write off quite a lot of carbon if we want to stay below the 1.5 degrees. So there's an enormous risk on balance sheets of companies. Financial market, $34 trillion of money under management, is asking for a price on carbon. $9 trillion has already signed up to the Bloomberg-Carney Task Force of Financial Disclosure. So the financial market wants less risk. They need to invest, often pension funds, that need to guarantee an income in the future, and that's important, but also a world that the pensioners can live in. That's becoming equally important. So the financial market is increasingly more interested in green financing, decarbonizing, and ensuring that they invest in the industries of the future. It's interesting, but companies that now are internalizing the issue of climate change and are taking mitigating actions are actually outperforming the rest of the market. So it's becoming a financially attractive proposition to do that. And I think the business people itself would at least should at least take note of that and study that and see if that is also applicable to their industries. Now, there are obviously, in any transition away from fossil fuel, there are winners and losers. So it is not surprising, and it should not be surprising to anybody, that there are some industries that are more reluctant or some even resilient to that change that is going to happen. And we need to be mindful of that and help those industries in those transitions.
There has been the tacit admission that things are moving too slowly. Who's putting the brakes?
Well, partly the things are moving too slowly because we've been so successful in growing these global economies. And we're carbon junkies. By growing these global economies, our emissions have gone up quicker than what we thought. You now see the developing markets grow. 70 years ago, 15% of the world economy was in the developing markets. Now it's 50%. So, and unfortunately, that growth that we have generated, that has lifted lots of people out of poverty, are now showing us that we're hitting these planetary boundaries. We're at 400 parts per million. We really have only 8 years left in our carbon budget if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees. So partly it's the success of our economic system. Now, we have shown with some of the studies that we've done, better growth, better climate is one of the reports that we published with the new Climate Economy Commission that was chaired by the former president of Mexico, Felipe Calderon, where we've shown that a transition now to a green economy away from fossil fuel can actually lift the global economy by $26 trillion and create 65 million jobs. And consumers are waking up. You have here now in New York, Greta Thunberg from Sweden, creating a lot of noise, a 16-year-old. Has created a whole new wave of activism, may I say. But people are starting to realize that citizens of this world are demanding change. Many companies are demanding change. And the governments of this world should take notice of that as they submit the more aggressive plans for 2020 to stay below the 1.5 degrees. There's no alternative. We have a lack of leaders and trees in this world. I've said it many times, so there's no question about that. We need more courageous leaders, also in the business community. We have some without naming them and the others without shaming them, but we have clearly not enough because many of the business leaders are not fully aware of the magnitude and the scale of transition that is needed. If you just want to stay below 2 degrees, you need to decarbonize in absolute by 40% in the next 20 years. But in the next 20 years, our global economies are probably going to double. So a 40% absolute reduction, a doubling of the global economy, means per unit of output, we need to have an 80% reduction in carbon. We've waited so long that the intervention we need to make are pretty severe. Now, the good thing is that increasingly technology is available and the cost of green energy is coming down. In 2/3 of the world, green energy is now cheaper than coal. In the next 2-3 years, we can obsolete all the coal in the world if we decided to do so. Well, what is difficult this year, we are dealing with the two biggest challenges that we have in the global economy, and we've never had to deal with that, which is actually climate change and actually income inequality. Now, I would argue these are closely related. If climate change goes up, more and more people will suffer. We have 800 million people living within a mile from the oceans that are probably the most vulnerable in the developing markets. We are now getting climate refugees. In Latin America, it takes a Peruvian fisherman now a whole day to fish to get the same income as what he could get in a few hours, a few years ago. So there is a real problem of the linking of the decarbonization of our economy and obviously creating a more equitable economy.
On a more personal scale, when did sustainability dawn on you?
Well, sustainability is actually not a question of the environment or not. The question is that we need to live in harmony with planet Earth has always been a given to me. Unfortunately, with the urbanization and us being farther removed from planet Earth, we don't take notice. And that's a very serious thing. I've always been, from my Boy Scout movements to my parents, etc., been interested in the environment and respecting it. But the real issue of sustainability is actually one of human development. So if you look at us in this current economic process, where we can only basically destroy nature to produce goods that we then dump in oceans or landfills again as an economic process, which clearly is not sustainable, you will also see, if you look at that it's the poor people that suffer. If you have big deforestations in Brazil, it's the indigenous, the 20 million indigenous people that depend on the forest that actually suffer. If you have air pollution, you have 8 million people that die prematurely that suffer. The poor people in cities that are not that resilient or don't have money to put their houses on the hills are the ones that are suffering. We've created some islands of prosperity, which we manage very well, in an ocean of poverty. And climate change will drive even more people into poverty. So it's a human development issue, and we should talk it as such.
Now you brought down to earth concepts were very theoretical, such as circular economy, such as climate justice. Now, firstly, as an executive, which were your main stumbling blocks?
Well, as you well know, even before Paris, 2 or 3 years before Paris, we could not get one CEO on the panel to talk climate change because it was such a complex topic. It was handled by scientists in a language that nobody really understood except the scientists themselves. And it's simply, you couldn't get your arms around it. CEOs don't like that, and it's not very tangible. CEOs need to know, what does it mean in my business and in my business model? What does it mean when I go to electric vehicles? What does it mean when I sign up to renewable energy for my factories? And how do I make these transitions? We decarbonized Unilever when I was running the company for 10 years. We totally decarbonized it. We moved to green energy everywhere. Took a little bit of effort, but I never had to pay more money than what I had to pay for fossil fuel. Now I have green energy. I don't have to worry about carbon pricing. And actually green energy is cheaper in most, if not all, places that we operate. Our employees are happier. They're proud to work for a company like that. We attract more people. And our products become actually more desirable with consumers. So internalizing these challenges and finding as business people solutions that make sense is very important.
The salmon industry, this is the second most important industry in Chile, for instance, the agriculture, and yet it has been also severely stigmatized because of its unsustainable ways.
Well, many of the industries, and in fishery you have many of the other industries as well, but also land-based industries need to move to sustainable farming. What you have also seen is the fish stock in the oceans disappear. You have seen plastics coming into the oceans to a point that 70% of the fish we buy has traces of plastic in there. In 2050 there's more plastic in the oceans than fish. If we want to guarantee the future of these industries, and they are very important industries, also in the balanced diets that people need, we need to be sure that we also sustainably farm that. And that goes hand in hand. Again, the companies that do this will do very well. There's many companies that have moved to sustainable fishery, and I think the consumers or the citizens of this world will increasingly demand that.
For things, who is truly the game changer? We have the heads of states convening now in the General Assembly. You have Greta Thunberg personifying the civil society. You have the private sector. Where's the spearhead?
The main driver of transition to a green economy now is the private sector. If you look at where the emissions are and who has the technology, the people, the resources to make that transition, then you have to really put your focus primarily on transforming some of the major parts of the private sector. Obviously, the fossil industry is the most important one here in that transformation. And we all need to work that together. Sure, there are some people that are irresponsible, that are only looking at their self-interest or very short term, and these people should be called out. But the majority of people now everywhere in the world, also amongst business people, want to make that transition. But sometimes they need some help from governments, but are holding them back. Sometimes they need a little push from consumers. Jeff Bezos made a very good decision to decarbonize Amazon. It's a very big sign that he sends into his value chain. But I'm not sure that he would have been as aggressive were it not for his employees that were threatening to walk out. So we need the yin and the yang. We need sometimes the signals, like Greta is organizing, and we need the willpower. You know, until now, we've benefited from responsible governments that have given us this wonderful world that we live in, that have given you your businesses that you're successful with. But the governments have played a major role in that. It's undeniable. Now that we are in a difficult position in government all across the world, should we just be cynical? Should we just blame them? Or should we just use that as an excuse for not moving forward? That's clearly not the answer. We cannot do that, because by doing that, we become complicit to these challenges that we face and making these challenges worse. We become complicit to pushing more people into poverty. We become complicit to letting people die from air pollution or from natural disasters. I don't want to be part of that. So now, as the governments have helped us until now, perhaps it's time for the private sector to help de-risk the political process. If you see, that is taking responsibility, and that is why we're here, and that's why these people became CEOs in the first place. The great thing of being a great leader is first and foremost to be a great human being, and to understand that you have to put the interest of others ahead of your own. And by doing so, you'd actually be better off yourselves as well. And that has always proven true in my life. Some people think greed is good, but over time, generosity always wins. And now it's time for collective generosity to ensure that we can live on this planet in harmony now and for generations to come. Many people feel that the economic system is not working for them anymore. Increasingly, for the first time last year, you had the bottom half of the world's population saw their combined income go down by 11%. We've never had that. Whilst the billionaires saw their income go up by 900 billion. So people are saying the system doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work for me. It's skewed towards a few people. So we need to change the financial markets. They have become shorter and shorter term. We need to value some other things. If we only value producing stuff as a measure of success, it's not going to work, because we have too many people in this world that are chasing too few things that we can produce. That's why we have this pressure on the planetary boundaries. We have to define success differently. It is bizarre that the GDP, when we have an oil spill in the Gulf, the GDP goes up. When the Gulf is clean, it doesn't get reflected. When we have wars and produce weapons, the GDP goes up. When we have peace, that's not reflected. When we produce a lot of stuff and have air pollution here and can barely breathe in cities across the world, our GDP goes up. When we have clean air, our GDP doesn't go up. So we do need to move to a broader definition of success and well-being than what we currently have. And that undoubtedly will lead us to figuring out how do we value social and environmental capital.